We had to cut that last video a little short because it was getting too long, and I know we started off and we were gonna do the Mustang seats and all this other stuff, and then got way too involved in the process of making that trike seat. So now, today, we are going to move on. This here is the 9091 Mustang rear seat. The kit we are using is actually from TMI. A lot of questions we get are about the quality of the kits, and people want to see them and know what's going on. You see these seats here, Grace already has taken the seat covers off for me, which is nice. And we're gonna go ahead and put the new covers on. One thing that you do, that she already did, is she took all the listing wires out and replaced them and put them exactly where they need to go so we can put the new cover on. Now people ask about the vinyl and leather and the factory match and stuff. And a lot of times you'll hear me say that the seat covers are pretty much all the same from the different companies. And they usually are. However, when you actually look at this seat kit here, and you compare apples to apples, it's very similar. I mean, considering the year of it, this is, you know, 91, and this is right here in 2021, and the leather's obviously newer, softer, more supple with a better graining, but it does have a very similar grain to the original. And their vinyl, at first I didn't think it was a good match, but when you put it up next to each other, it's actually really, really close. So this cover here looks really good. I'm gonna go and actually start putting it together, and we'll see how it fits. As you see me do this, I'll use manual hog ring pliers, but then I'm gonna jump over to the pneumatic ones because I just really don't have time to mess around. But we always say we try to use tools that you could use in your house, at your home, so you guys should get it done too. Now I'm just gonna turn this seat cover inside out. You always wanna turn it inside out. And I'm actually gonna inspect it before. We actually quickly inspected the outside and looked, and there was zero damage to the covers. Everything's in great shape. It came right out of the box nice. And what I'm looking at here, everything is done very nicely. There's no messed up stitching on it. Sometimes you'll see stuff that's messed up. This here, I am gonna trim this. If you look at this listing wires here for the listing channel is supposed to be loose. It's actually sewn together on this one, which is super common. So we're just gonna do a little snip. When you do your snips, you keep it away from any of the threads. Keep it at least a 1/8 inch to 3/16 away from any of the sewing threads. And now we have this nice and flappity. Do the same thing over here. Trying to work backwards so you can see it. All right, well, we're waiting for the steamer to fire up. I'm gonna put a few manual hog rings in here so you can see how we do this. You always wanna kind of make sure your covers are centered. Everything lines up really well. Channels, listing channels that go inside here. I'll tuck that right down. Make sure everything's nice and lined up. You want to look at your edges on both sides, left and right, to make sure they line up, because if they're too big or too short, you want to catch that before you start putting holes into the seat. Now we're going to begin here. There's different sequences depending on where the listings are. This one does not have any listing channels in the center, so we're going to start and do these two first, then we'll do our side ones, and then we'll flip it over. So again, we're going to get this set up. And I am going to just take these manual hog ring pliers, and I see there's a channel right there. Where is that bad boy? Right there. I'm going to line this up. I'm going to put this through here, and I'm going to get this in here. So that went through, and you can see on the back side, what I end up doing is just hooking that around there. You just take the squeeze pliers and squeeze them around there. I'm going to go through and hit all these now. Okay, now we got that, and you always want to yank on it. If you're timid and you put your hog ring in, you're afraid to pull on the seat cover, you don't want to get the whole thing together and have a hog ring or a staple or something like that pop off. So now I'm going to switch over to the pneumatic pliers. And here, when you're using pneumatic ones or any hog ring pliers, it's just especially with pneumatic, you want to make sure you don't pinch through the fabric. With these long listings, it's nice because you're far away. When you get some of these like this, your hog rings are actually pretty close to the cover, and if you by chance pinch that, it would go right through. Okay, make sure it's nice and tight, which it is. Everything's penetrated through, and now we're going to move to the sides here. We're just going to make sure our sides are pulled tight. Everything's lined up. Going right through there, bada boom. Okay, here's the manual one, same principle. We're just going to pull that tight, go around here, go right through there, make sure they're nice and tight. That one didn't look like it was quite tight enough, so I just want to squeeze it down. But now you can see we got these on there, we're good. We'll do the other side now. What I'm just gonna do is gonna push all my material inside out. You want everything perfectly inside out, like so. And we're gonna grab our steamer. Now, when you do higher end leather interiors, a lot of times you don't have sew foams on them and stuff. You'll actually steam the backside of the leather, which you're supposed to. A lot of people say not to steam the face of the leather, even though we all do it. And the reason is some of the less expensive leathers, the dyes will come off. You know, you do have to be careful to steam because you can burn stuff. It is very hot. But what we're gonna do now is we turned everything inside. I'm just gonna start steaming inside here. Same principle you're gonna use with a heat gun. You know, if it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for the leather. But we're just gonna get this nice and warm and put some moisture into it. The sides are actually vinyl, but the heat from the steamer will still act as a heat gun and melt that, or not melt it, we don't wanna melt that. It'll just warm it up so it moves really nice. Now the reason that we always turn everything out, inside out when you're doing upholstery, and I'll show you, is you wanna take your hand and put it on the inside of the welting or the seam. You're gonna wanna hold that over and make sure your seam is exactly where it needs to go. Now you're just gonna roll it. You wanna keep and roll all that. And what you're doing when you're rolling it is keeping this from getting wrinkly and puckered up. If I was to just like fold it over and start yanking it, it's gonna move all over. So we're just gonna do that. I'm gonna move down and do the same thing on this side here. Get a little steam action in here, get it nice and moist. Okay, now we just folded it over. You saw how easy that was. So I'm just gonna take and kind of massage just a little bit. It's nice when it's wet. It actually just moves around a little bit better. And let's go and do the same thing to this side. Now some seat covers, especially when you're doing like vintage cars, like older Mustangs and muscle cars and Camaros and stuff, you know, you might start the bottom before the top. There's different sequences you do. These ones are fairly easy. So all we're doing is we're just getting these corners that we're working really nice and warm. So now I'm gonna hang this up over here and we're gonna roll this over. Paying attention to make sure it lines up on the edge where you want it, spreading it apart, and then just nicely rolling it so it just comes around nicely. And we're gonna do the same thing on the bottom again. Now a lot of these seat covers are pre-done and they're made to go exactly in place where they're supposed to go. So you don't want to overstretch them or understretch them. Spin this around. I'm gonna line this up with the edge. I'm pulling it with my thumb and kind of just rolling the material over nice. And you can see it just gave it a nice little edge there. We're just gonna get this nice and warm. You get a lot of areas like this where they're gonna want to pucker up on you because you have two horizontal butt seams and then you have a smooth center. So that's always going to be an issue area there. You're going to want to heat it up. I always like to heat up the entire surface evenly, even though there's a problem that we know is going to be here. We don't want to overheat one area opposed to the other in the beginning. And again, when you're steaming on the face of the material, you got to always be careful. You always want to feel it. I can feel my arm, how warm it's getting because the steam always rises. And you should always be careful because you can burn yourself with the steam. So now we're gonna go through and we're gonna make sure that our center lines are all centered. And we're centered with the foam, which is nice. And we are centered with the center hog ring. Most vehicles, the first hog ring or the center is gonna have either one in the center or it's gonna be off center. So you can sometimes go by that. If you're questioning, you can always just measure it. So I'm gonna put these in here. We're gonna see where we're going because I have a funny feeling that we're not gonna get some of these wrinkles out just by going by the factory pattern. We'll show you that. So I just put a few in here, right? Now we're gonna go through and you see here, Houston, we still have a huge problem. This here. Now, let's just out of curiosity, we pull this around, centered everything up. And if we do it where they say to do it, so we still have a bit of an issue here. We got some big wrinkles that aren't gonna really come out like that. So I think what I have to do is pull it a little more, and you gotta be careful because if you over pull these things, not gonna look right. I think what we're gonna end up doing is, I'm gonna steam this again. We're gonna pull some hog rings out and we're gonna back roll this and move this up an extra inch, and the same thing with the bottom. When you are removing hog rings, the best thing to do is grab it and twist it. See that? Nice and easy. Oops. Steam this